friends. It's been a second. I said that in my last video, but this time it's actually been a second. It's the end of the month, so I'm sure you're well aware why we've gathered. I am going to be telling you about all the books I read in June. Nope. May. Yes, in May. I am clearly just all over the place. I'm very sleep deprived. I've been working on a very exciting project. Hopefully that I'll be able to share with you within the next couple of weeks. But it's been consuming a lot of my time, so I took the week away from posting last week. So between that and being in the worst reading slump, it's been an interesting month. I just accepted my fate at this point. That being said, I just didn't get much reading done, but I'm going to tell you about all the books I did manage to read. So I started the month out with First Semester by Kaylee Tyler. One of my lovely friends sent me this book for my birthday. It is a novella. It is only... I just opened to a smut scene. That was a jump scare. 176 pages. So that's actually why I started the month out with this book. My poor reading slump has been going on for probably 2 months now. Truthfully, as a novella, I was pleasantly surprised. I've been on the search for shorter reads to recommend to you, just because when you're in this position where you're in a reading slump, sometimes you just need a smutty novella to get you through. There's no shame in that. That being said, you've got to go into this one with an open mind. So essentially, it's all about Skylar, I think her name was. Yes, Skylar and Aiden. She's just gotten back to the States from spending some time abroad. There, she got her heart broken. So she's looking for a rebound. The night before her first day at college, one of her floor mates, I suppose, invites her to a party, but she ends up coming clean about her heartbreak to this girl that invited her to the party. She signs Skylar up for a dating site. You are already well aware where this is going. So essentially, they end up going to a club while she's chatting with this guy. Enter Aiden. He's just gotten out of a long-term relationship. Now, Aiden isn't quite the rebound type, but his best friend Chase is visiting for the weekend to what Aiden assumes is help him get settled because he's just gotten a job as a professor. My parents are outside my window. Should I keep going or... Okay. The college he's going to be teaching at, lucky for us, is also Skylar's college. So essentially, his best friend Chase ends up dragging him to this college bar, much like Skylar's friend, whose name I can never remember to save my life. They end up meeting, taking it to a more private place. She walks into class the next day, boom, he's her professor. I ate that plot up. I'm gonna be completely transparent about that. Like I said, you've got to keep an open mind because there's only so much you can do with 200 pages. I usually struggle with the insta-love trope, but if you can look past it, by all means, give it a go. The writing was definitely awkward at times. There just wasn't any emotional connection between the characters. But I don't want to deter anyone away from reading it just because it is an acquired taste. It wasn't exactly my cup of tea, but it definitely won't be my only book by this author. I think I'm going to prefer her longer writing as opposed to the novellas. I did rate it 3 stars though. But then I ended up reading an arc of Rewrite Our Story. It was our introduction to Kat Singleton's new series, Sutton Mountain. I absolutely love this author. She is the sweetest. I actually DM'd her on Instagram a couple of weeks ago asking what book of hers she recommended I read first. Everyone on Book Talk has just been raving about her writing. So naturally, me being me, I needed to see what was up. So she actually told me to read Black Ties and White Lies. While that is on my TBR, I ended up getting an arc of this book before I could get to it. So I just thought, what better way to introduce myself to her writing than this? So it's an angsty, small town, second chance, best friend's brother romance. I will say, those tropes are everything. Not even one chapter in and I was losing it. That prologue was brutal. I just couldn't keep reading through the tears in my eyes. It was so sad. Mare is our female protagonist and she just deserves the world and then some. She saw so much at such a young age. So her mother ended up passing away when she was only 10. So she ended up spending the rest of her childhood with an emotionally detached father. You couldn't blame her if she chose to see the world through anything other than rose-colored glasses, yet that wasn't what we saw. Yet she just grinned and bared it. She is a dreamer, and while she's got this big heart, that also comes with a lot of heartbreak. So the story is told in alternating timelines. While I do love that, I think it started way too soon. There was no chance for me to connect with the characters before getting a glimpse of the past. Whenever a story is set up that way, to me, It's so you learn more about their character and the choices they make. It isn't necessarily for you to fall more in love with the characters, even though that could also be true. So Mare ends up finding solace in the Jennings family, especially Cade, who is her best friend's brother. Now, there's a slight age gap. It isn't too much, but she's got this childhood crush on him. He doesn't exactly reciprocate it until they get a lot older, thankfully. There was a chapter there where I thought it was all going to go downhill. She was 10 and he was already in his teens. I was very nervous. No worries though. No weird behavior goes down. Well, don't quote me on that. But she ends up going to his house almost every night just to be with someone. As I mentioned before, she's got this emotionally detached father. So being as she's an only child, it's definitely affecting her in more ways than one. But she wishes every birthday that this man will fall in love with her. Look, I personally would never grovel for a man like that, but you do you. Now, back in present time, Mare doesn't live in Sutton Mountain anymore. She's a best-selling romance author. She ends up needing to come back to Sutton Mountain because a tragedy took place. She ends up spending a lot of time with the Jennings family as usual. Clearly something went down between Cade and Mare. They're angry with each other. There's a lot of angst. There's unfinished business to be done, okay? Cade, our Brody male lead, is definitely an acquired taste. In my opinion, he just came across as very emotionally immature and manipulative. It's giving Conrad from the Summer I Turned Pretty series. The entire time I was reading this book, that's all I could think. There were a lot of red flags, but truthfully, I just let them keep waving because he was hot. He was a dirty talking country boy. I've been in my cowboy romance era lately. He could talk down to me any day of the week. I'm a feminist except when it comes to him, apparently. I mean, there were some good intentions there, I want to believe. Probably not. Mare's actual name is Marigold. He ended up planting her a field of marigolds. He ended up building her dream house. Tell me that doesn't just melt your heart. Is he trying to buy her love? Maybe. Or maybe acts of service are just his love language. I am choosing to believe the best. As for the plot, I would have definitely preferred there to be a couple more chapters before we jumped into the alternating timelines, just to establish the characters and the plot. It being as abrupt as it was meant that those chapters weren't as beneficial as they could have been. I was still trying to understand where Cade and Mare stood with each other during the present day. I am always an alternating timeline lover. It builds the suspense, and in this scenario, the angst. I love myself some good drama, okay? I'm not sure what I was expecting steam-wise, but it definitely wasn't that. It was a lot more detailed and longer than I thought it was going to be. Overall, it was still a very digestible read that you could get through in a day or two. I say that as someone that was in the world's worst reading slump at the time. While it wasn't exactly my cup of tea, I think a lot of people enjoyed it a lot more than I did. I'm trying to understand why. I just want to see this book from everyone else's perspective. But that being said, I am very excited for Pippa and Camden's book. I love a cute little enemies to lovers romance. Their dynamic was just, it was everything. It was my world. I thought about it for a lot longer than I should have. The sexual tension was just radiating off of them. It was so palpable. But I ended up rating it 4 stars. So then I went into Second Semester, also by QB Tyler. Once again, I just wanted a book I could read in a day. I'm gonna be completely transparent though, I don't think the author's writing was for me. So this novella was all about Serena, Skylar's older sister. She's interning at their father's law firm. So she ends up meeting her father's best friend, Landon West. He is a partner at this firm. So they've got this forbidden romance going on. At this point, I was very well aware that these novellas were not for me. The tone of the male characters is just outwardly and wildly misogynistic and sexist. I was appalled. It was giving very much toxic masculinity. Some people may be able to look past it given it is just meant to be a steamy read. I am not one of those people. I am never one of those people. I am an unbearable reader, truth be told. Neither is right or wrong, it just wasn't my cup of tea. There's a lot of people that enjoyed it and I won't question that. But to me, the character growth was just too abrupt. It lacked any and all natural progression. Both Serena and Landon were just unbearable. Someone needed to say it. They are definitely a book couple that is going to get divorced. Will they even make it past the 1 year mark? Probably not. Even as an age gap girly, there was a little side eye on this one. Just because of how old Landon's son was. That made me uncomfortable. Maybe not even uncomfortable, I just couldn't take the dynamic seriously. So I ended up also rating this one 3 stars, but then after reading the blurb for the next one, I stopped. The entire novella revolved around the cheating trope. Count me out on that one. It was clearly the month for arcs because then I ended up reading Under the Stars by Laura Pavlov. It is the second book in the Cottonwood Cove series. Now, I started reading Laura Pavlov during the end of her last series. I absolutely love the coziness and comfort behind her writing. She definitely excels when it comes to writing those family dynamics. So this was actually one of my more anticipated reads of the year, just because when I read Hugh and Lila's story, I just absolutely fell head over heels in love with the Reynolds family, especially Georgia. So this is a boss employee, grumpy sunshine, small town, somewhat enemies to friends to lovers romance between the youngest daughter in the Reynolds family and billionaire Maddox Lancaster. I love rich men. I will immediately look past so many red flags if the character you're writing is rich. It needed to be said. We're all just trying to get by in this world. So I definitely thought this story was going to be my favorite out of this series. Hugh and Lila were definitely going to be difficult to beat, but surely I thought Georgia would be equally as lovable. I was so wrong. She was probably my favorite Reynolds sibling. I say was because she definitely isn't now. I just don't think her character arc aligned very well with the portrayal that we got of her from the previous book. I could be very wrong about that. Actually, no, opinions are subjective, but it's been a while since I read the last book. I will say there are a lot of aspects of her personality that I just love. She's just a ray of sunshine, and as you are all well aware by now, those are my favorite characters. She's not gonna let anyone dim her light, especially not her Brody boss. She's just got this uniqueness about her that captivates you. Now that being said, her quirky personality did me in. It was so awkward. It was embarrassing. It wasn't even secondhand embarrassment. I was more embarrassed than she was in those moments. I just cringed my entire way through this book. I've never done that. I've cringed less reading stories on Wattpad than I did this. Every time I thought we were done, she'd just do something that was even more excruciatingly painful. I could just be dramatic, but she just didn't seem to understand social cues very well. I did get a good giggle out of this one. I just never want to read the words giant schlong and Mount Caucasaurus in a book or at all ever again. Why? Out of all of the words in the English dictionary, those were the ones you chose. Make it make sense. Please, let's keep it real. Let's be serious. But putting that aside, pretending it doesn't exist, I appreciate the way she stood her ground. She didn't let anyone intimidate her. So I would definitely say that is her strongest quality. She's an empath with a heart of gold. I'll give her that. I was pleasantly surprised when I ended up loving Maddox's character even more than Georgia's. So as I mentioned, I thought she was going to be my favorite sibling. Clearly that didn't end up panning out. But although Maddox appears to be this cold-hearted workaholic, there's just a lot of trauma he needs closure from. While it may justify his feelings, he never takes it out on Georgia. Bare minimum, I am well aware, but I'll take what I can get in this day and age, okay? His character development was just absolutely incredible. He's got a lifetime of healing after seeing everything he saw as a child, but he's honest with himself and he's not afraid to seek the guidance he needs. As for their dynamic, I deeply appreciate that there wasn't this overbearing instant attraction. It took them both quite some time before they even inwardly acknowledged their feelings toward one another. The progression of the relationship was just very natural. It wasn't exactly a slow burn, but they did take their time learning to enjoy everything about each other. Despite their very distinct differences in lifestyles while growing up and even now, Georgia is just determined to make him a part of the Reynolds family. I want to be a part of the Reynolds family. Just please adopt me. do it. I'll send you all the paperwork. I'll get my legal team that I don't have on it. Also, his nickname for her, he called her Tink. It was actually so cute. I loved it. Tell me that isn't just the sweetest. As I mentioned, I just absolutely love Laura's way of writing family dynamics. The Reynolds love is truly what keeps me coming back for more. Even though this was on the lower end of books I read this year, rating-wise, I will definitely be reading the next book in the series just to spend more time with the characters. Even when the family isn't getting along, they've just got a healthy dynamic. I'm sure it comes from the mother being a therapist. There were so many moments in the book where George's family just stepped up to the plate to support her, even when she insisted that she could get by on her own. I said it after I read Hugh and Lila's book, but the family text thread is just such a nice touch. Usually I don't like it, but it makes the writing more personal and it gives us a glimpse of all of the other characters we're going to be introduced to in their own stories eventually. It also rounds out the main protagonists. It just lets us see another side to them. I am also still mourning because I've come to the conclusion that we probably won't be getting Cage's story until the end of the series. He is a single dad, naturally. I love single dads. I love DILFs. I just do. It's not news to anybody. I am a single dad kind of girly, and just seeing him with his daughter Gracie did me in. It so melted my heart. My ovaries just disappeared, absolutely imploded. Now, that being said, one of my constant critiques with Pavlov's writing is that it's too formal. It's just a lot more noticeable to me. It's what prevents me from giving a 4-star book 5 stars. No one's inner dialogue is that professional. There's just so much potential with that aspect of her writing. I will say though, I am overly analytical. It clearly didn't affect the reading experience that much because I ended up reading this book in one sitting. Now, as far as the plot goes, I am always going to be a lover of the book within a book trope. Nothing makes the experience more enjoyable than reading about characters that love reading as much as you do. So as I mentioned, Maddox is Georgia's boss, but essentially it's a publishing branch. So Lancaster Press is home of some of Georgia's favorite authors, so seeing her interact with them was just so wholesome. She's living my dream life, so I'm living vicariously through her. Everything I said was very contradictory, but that aside, I don't want to discredit this author's writing just because one book wasn't my cup of tea. She's got a talent for writing small town stories, I will admit. I'm a little nervous to read Brinkley and Lincoln's story just because I think Lincoln is going to come across as very misogynistic and sexist. There better be some serious character redemption there. But I ended up rating this book 3 stars. I will say a lot of the books I read this month did end up earning lower stars than I usually give, but I wouldn't exactly say it was a bad reading month. Okay, then I got to read an arc of Unfortunately Yours by Tessa Bailey. It is the second book in the A Vine Mess duology. It is all about Julian's sister Natalie and August Cates. Now, he was previously a Navy SEAL, but after losing his best friend, he ends up coming to Napa Valley to open a vineyard. Now, he doesn't even know where to start, but he's determined to make his buddy proud. Natalie is just coming home from losing her fiance and her job, but she is just squirming to get out of Napa Valley. But she needs her trust fund so that she can start a new business venture. But much to her dismay, she needs to marry to get the money. Very old school. August, also pursuing a business venture, can't get a loan. So they decide they're gonna do a cute little marriage of convenience to get their money. What could go wrong? Well, let's start with they're supposedly enemies. I mean, they're getting a little cozy with each other, but who am I to judge? So this is another down-to-earth, small town, enemies to lovers, he falls first, marriage of convenience rom-com. I was thinking so many thoughts, but also none at all about this book, so just bear with me. Usually Tessa's writing tends to lean on the lighter side, but I was very surprised to see that August and Natalie's story dealt with a lot of those more difficult topics like PTSD, alcoholism, and growing up with dysfunctional family dynamics. That being said, it still was a very digestible book. Those aspects just gave the characters more depth without making the story overwhelming. Natalie is definitely one of those characters I sense a lot of people are going to emotionally connect with. She is the epitome of a mirror ball. This is me trying the Archer, the Man, Matilda, My Tears Ricochet girly. Clearly you need to emotionally prepare yourself for that. She's just a girl trying to find her place in the world. As someone that doesn't usually vibe with the miscommunication trope, I was very pleased to see that Natalie, while she may not be the best communicator, is still an empath and is able to take a step back and look at a situation from multiple vantages. As for August, I was down so bad for that man since Hallie and Julian's story. There was no need to convince me there. He is an obsessive and protective force of a man. That being said, there were definitely times where that alpha male attitude became a little too much for me to overlook. It was the I think with my dick mentality. I mean, okay. It just didn't sit well with me at some points. But his heart is in the right place. I was a little worried because the third act breakup was definitely being insinuated there, but no worries, there isn't one. I can proudly say that our protagonists work through their struggles together as they should. They're both adults. They are both stubborn individuals with a vulnerable side. They balance each other out perfectly. They just bring out the best in each other. Not in the beginning, but eventually. The epilogue is most definitely my favorite one that Tessa's ever written. I definitely tabbed this one a lot more than Secretly Yours. Looking back at it, I ended up giving Secretly Yours 4 stars. I also gave Unfortunately Yours 4 stars, but I'd probably lean closer to 4.5. I will say, I am still undecided on my rating. I enjoyed it, but I'm a little conflicted because I'm not sure if it was because I was in a reading slump that it took me so long to read it, or just the style of writing. Usually I'm able to read her books in one sitting, maybe 2, but this took me a little over a week. I was buddy reading it with someone, but I will say the pacing and angst toward the end are a lot more bearable than they were at the beginning. I was waiting for the tension, both sexual and emotional, to build between them, and it just never did. There were also a lot of metaphors and analogies that just didn't make sense. They were very out of the blue. I'm also not sure why they hated each other so much. I'm not sure if I just skimmed past that or she actually never answered that question, but there was a lot about this story that just seemed a little too surface level. I will say, if you're looking for a fun read to just escape the busyness of life, Unfortunately Yours is definitely a good place to start. But in Goodreads, I put this in as 4 stars. Don't quote me on it. Okay. Then I read Hazel Fine Sings Along. I'm not sure what to say. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So essentially, Hazel Fine is competing in a sing-along competition on national television. She's got a lot of competition. She ends up falling for the show's musical director. I don't think there's anything else to say about the plot other than that. It's essentially the blurb on the back. While this isn't the author's debut novel, it is her debut novel when it comes to romance, to my understanding. So I always strive to give authors the benefit of the doubt when it comes to a genre they've never written or even never writing at all before. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes of writing and editing a book. Letting it out into the world can be very anxiety inducing. I understand that. I will say the idea behind Hazel Fine Sings Along is brilliant. It's just the way the author went about writing it that lost it for me. I want to preface, while this is marketed as a rom-com, it's definitely not. It really isn't. It was very difficult for me to empathize with Hazel as a character. She was so unbearable. She wasn't sure what ground she stood on with literally anything as a 30-year-old adult. Girl, please be so for real. She didn't appear to be passionate about music or anything, the way the author wants us to believe. She was very much self-involved and immature. She lies to anyone and everyone, even when there's no reason to. Even she admits she takes it too far. That, my friends, is called a pathological liar. She just didn't think about anyone else when she made decisions. I tried to give her some leeway given the environment. It is very competitive, but there were just no excuses at this point. I also cannot believe, after creating this entire identity to separate herself from her childhood trauma, she would forgive her parents that easily. She mended that relationship without a second thought. Didn't think twice about it. Even I could tell that was the wrong decision. Her parents were so narcissistic and manipulative. And yet I'm supposed to believe after all the damage they caused her, they deserve to be back in her life. Okay. Her bunny also just annoyed me. Checkers, I believe the bunny's name was. Yeah, I don't care. What was the point? She's got this deep emotional connection to it apparently, but we're not sure why because it was never explored. Don't even get me started on Hazel and her love interest Nick. There was absolutely zero chemistry. None whatsoever. Neither platonic or romantic. I just don't see their partnership lasting very long at all, in every sense of the word. He gave off the vibes of every mediocre, misogynistic white man that I've ever had the displeasure of meeting. There was no one I rooted for in this story. Literally no one. Not the main characters, most definitely not the supporting characters. There are just certain morals you can't compromise when it comes to being friends with people. The way Zoe just blatantly invalidated Hazel's experience with sexual harassment was astounding. Not only that, she compares it to the way she feels when her girlfriend brings her to rallies and marches. The red flag is working overtime at the speed it's going. Point blank, her character was ignorant and tone deaf. The character growth as it pertains to literally everyone was just stagnant. I wanted a stable sense of camaraderie between the contestants, especially the girls. Given the nature of the plot, I don't want to say too much just in case you are planning on reading this. I advise you don't, but that's your prerogative. But after the accusations against a certain member of the panel came out, they should have banded together. Or at least some of them, but it ended up just driving a bigger wedge between them. While I understand that may be the realm of believability for some people, it wasn't for me. The plot was just chaotic. There was so much going on all at once, and also not anything at all. Every conflict was met with a surface level introduction and solution. The story just lacked direction. Not to mention the constant TikTok references. Now that just may be a stylistic preference on my end, but I think it dates the story instead of making it timeless. Also, after that, I'm supposed to believe the names Benji and Bella aren't intentional. The last straw? Are you ready for it? She chose to sing fight song. I wish I was lying. I wish I was. There's just no way. I could bear the constant pop culture references. Believe it or not, I could. But I will not let this slide. I draw the line there. It was not the sleigh she thinks it was. I took off at least 2 stars for that one. Absolutely atrocious. The story just had so much untapped potential and just felt very underdeveloped, so I only gave it 2 stars. Unapologetically too. Moving on to literally any other book but that one. Then I read The Problem with Second Chances by Piper Rain. I also read this one as an ARC. It was my introduction to this author. I never read any of her other books before. It is also our introduction to the Starlight series. It is an angsty second chance friends to lovers sports romance between 2 soccer players, Rylan and Callista. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce her name. I'm gonna Google it. Hello? Why is his voice so deep? Oh my god. Trying to seduce me. Callista. I think I may have said it correct. Give me butterflies. Oh my god. Anyway, they've known each other since they were 6. They played soccer together, except now Rylan is the only one playing professionally. They've been rivals, teammates, friends, lovers. They've done it all, seen it all. But 3 years ago, something went down, and now Callista is back in Lake Starlight while Rylan is living in the city, living her dream. Except now, get this, their best friends are getting married. So now, he's got to come back into town. They've got to see each other again. That's what you get. So she's the maid of honor, he's the best man. We all know the story. Will they get their second chance? They do. I want to start by prefacing that I truly did enjoy this style of writing. It was very cozy and flowed naturally. That being said, I don't think this particular narrative was for me. The idea was solid. It was just the way the authors went about it that wasn't exactly my cup of tea. Both Rylan and Callista were just making their situation out to be a lot more complicated than it actually was. No one's standing in your way but you. They are the definition of that. I could just be saying that because as readers, we don't get to see the depth of their relationship until we're about 70% of the way through the book. As someone with no prior knowledge to any of the author's previous works, especially the series that apparently comes before this about the Baileys, there were just too many people to keep track of. I just wasn't sure who was who, and it ended up creating an emotional gap between the characters and I. I was just going with the flow at that point. They would drop a name and I would be like, okay, oh yeah, I know who that is. Girl, no you don't. Let's keep it real. There seemed to be this lack of plot. There were a lot of moments that just seemed to drag on a lot longer than necessary, trying to make up for the overwhelming amount of characters. I would have definitely suggested dialing it back on the character involvement and instead focused on the main characters and their intermediate family. No cousins, aunts, uncles, or grandparents, just their parents, siblings, and best friends. That being said, I am very excited to read Brindley and Van's story. She's a widow and he's a bad boy biker. So good. I am an absolute sucker for the good girl bad boy pairing. Add that with the angst and the sexual tension and you've got yourself a definite favorite. I'm definitely considering adding the Bailey series to my never-ending TBR. They've just roped me in. They seemed very sweet. I did also only give this book 3 stars, but it's probably closer to 3.5 or 3.75, just to put it out there. Well friends, those are all the books I read in May. I would love to know what books you read in May, what books you're planning on reading in June. My Bookstagram DMs are always open. I post daily on my Bookstagram and almost daily on my book talk. You can see what I'm currently reading over on Goodreads. If you want to read with me, I've got a book club over on Fable. It's called Lessons in Love and you should totally join. It looks like our June book of the month is going to be People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. But I love you all, and as always, happy reading.